So I've played D&D for a few years now, and I generally prefer fantasy settings over sci-fi worlds. A big part of that is because I love magic, the mystery and wonder behind its existence, and the wonder it can inspire in those who behold it. Or because it just looks really cool. Making a magic system is easy, but making an internally consistent magic system that can keep suspending your disbelief seems to be surprisingly difficult, which is why many tend to lean towards hard magic systems, like just about anything in the Stormlight archive. I also prefer hard magic systems, and I've wanted to come up with something that I could possibly build a game around. So one night, when I was reading about the properties of quartz and the ways the old people use them, I thought, they probably thought quartz was magical. And then it struck me. It could be magical. There's a famous quote by Sir Arthur Charles Clarke that describes my thoughts perfectly. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So I intend to build on precisely that idea. This is going to be the first episode of a miniseries talking about how technologies we are familiar with today could be used as a basis for a hard magic system. In a different timeline, some alchemists could have discovered these thousands of years ago and create quote-unquote magical arts that are completely feasible with our modern understanding of science. And as you probably have already discovered from the title, the first episode will be about one of the most fundamental of plot devices, magical substances. Let's begin. We can start from my previous example, quartz. Quartz itself could be used to base an entire magic system around it, with its many colorful variants. The ancient Romans carried the likes of onyx and tiger's eye to battle for courage and protection, and that's already two spells that we can make from quartz variants. But let's stick to quartz's common properties for now. The first I want to mention is piezoelectricity. Piezoelectricity is the phenomenon of a material developing an electric potential when mechanical stress is applied to it, aka making electricity by beating the fuck out of it. This has a lot of uses in modern technology, but what a medieval alchemist could make of it is what I want to talk about. One example I can quickly think of is as a storage of magical potential. A quartz crystal that has been cut and treated in a specific manner can become fragile due to its crystalline structure. A mage could get some extra power by crushing one of these crystals, shattering it to a million pieces and releasing the electric potential, gaining more power to either charge themselves or to cast a mightier spell. Another property of quartz that could be seen as magical is tripoluminescence, which releases light instead of electricity with mechanical stress. And, sorry if I butcher this, Uncompahgre Ute people seem to agree with me, since they were the first documented people in the world to make use of this. They made ceremonial rattles made of translucent buffalo rawhide that had quartz inside it. During nightly ceremonies, the rattles would flash with light when the crystals hit each other, like tiny fireflies in the dark. One fun thing I found during researching for this video is that tripoluminescence can apparently happen with soft tissues, including chewing, blood circulation, and sexual intercourse. So I'll have to leave discussing the implications of this for the video about magic systems. That should be a jolly good time. The next substance I want to mention is magnetite, or more specifically lodestones. Lodestones are naturally magnetized pieces of magnetite which can attract iron. They were used to create the first compasses, invaluable trinkets for faraway expeditions and traveling in general. Magnetism itself is quite a mysterious phenomenon even by today's standards, so making something mystical from it should be pretty easy. Hell, even their creation process is downright a cult. The current leading hypothesis is that lodestones are magnetized by the strong magnetic fields of lightning bolts. Just imagine, the court sorcerer is given a task of making lodestones to supply the king's bodyguards with sword-attracting shields, so they wait for a storm and go to their tower of steel. Then great bolts of lightning strike the heart of the ritual, imbuing the lodestones with their awesome power. And that's just one example. There's a lot you can make with permanent magnets, like, I don't know, Generators for direct and alternating current for just about anything you can think of. One of the materials that I want to talk about is probably not something you expected, that being Starlite.
Wait, isn't Starlight's recipe unknown?
Well, kinda, but not exactly. Nighthawking Light has made great videos on the subject, so if you want to know more then please check him out. But the short version is that Starlite is a carbon foam based flame retardant, which can be made from ingredients as simple as flour, cornstarch, sugar and baking soda, all of which have been available for the longest time for even the simplest of peasants. You could use Starlite for defense against dragons and demons, both of which love to abuse fire like it owed them money. A more developed mixture could be used to plate armor, making actual black knights. Have fun walking into Lost Isolate for an afternoon jog with your AirPods on. Just beware of bongs. If you have elves in your setting and you want to give them something truly thematic, give them spider silk. There are different types of spider silk with varying properties, but the ones we are interested in are dracline and flagelliform silk. Dracline is the one what you're probably thinking of when I say spider silk, with tensile strength comparable to high-grade steel and toughness to surpass Kevlar. The strongest silk ever discovered was found from the Darwin's bark spider, an orb weaver whose silk is the toughest biological material ever studied, with a tensile strength of 1.6 gigapascals, which is higher than most steels and is over 10 times tougher than Kevlar. That's basically mithril. Flagelliform silk is the sticky web used for catching prey, which is usable indefinitely, it's biodegradable and ready for immediate usage. Making enough silk for an entire elven city sounds like a tall order though, until you realize that a single park spider can make a web the size of 2.8 square meters. Breeding them to become a more colonial species would give them more silk than they could ever need. Fuck it, use it to make giant tree houses, it's not like they're gonna run out anytime soon. There are two metals that could technically fall into the category of magical substances, but their mystical nature will be completely dependent on what historical age your setting takes place in. Those being meteoric iron and aluminum. This is due to these metals being exceedingly rare and mysterious during times where you simply could not get them from anywhere. For example, meteoric iron was the only source of iron apart from the minor amounts of telluric iron found on Earth, which is extremely rare. A world without high-capacity smelters would be more reliant on bronze as a common metal, leaving iron or, God forbid, steel items as rare, highly coveted artifacts. A chosen warrior with a steel warhammer made from meteoric iron would be a terror on the battlefield, capable of rending the bronze armor of the cruel tyrant soldiers into pieces, carving the way for them to reunite with their lost lover once and for all. Aluminum is an odd metal to consider as rare enough to be considered magical, but that requires some context. Aluminum metal, as it turns out, is very rare in its native metallic form, due to its tendency to easily form oxides. When adding the fact that the refining process is quite complex, and you can understand why aluminum was discovered officially as late as 1825 by Danish physicist Hans Christian Ørsted. Before its first industrial production in 1856, aluminum was more commonly known in the world in its salt form of alum, and after its first metallic synthesis it was more valuable than gold. And aluminum has wonderful properties that medieval folk would have certainly appreciated, such as being almost 3 times less dense than iron and being equally as hard as ruby. Aluminum could have been used to make extremely sharp and light swords, which could explain the ridiculous abilities of glorious Nippon steel. Aluminum's desire to oxidize also makes it very good fuel in certain circumstances, like as one of the components of thermite. Yeah, that's right. Thermite. All you need to make it is some aluminum powder which you can grind from your Pebbles cans, and some metal oxide, like the rust from your dad's old car that he never finished repairing despite spending a pretty penny buying it in the midst of his midlife crisis. Oh sorry, what was I saying? Oh yes, fire! have you ever wanted to make a cursed weapon? Like an actual cursed weapon. So much so that simply being in its presence is enough to doom you to a slow, agonizing death? Well, I have a solution just for you. Ever heard of uranium? If you don't know what uranium is, then I have something very important to tell you. Uranium is a weakly radioactive heavy metal, both traits which makes it toxic enough that you definitely should not handle it without proper PPE. So thankfully, uranium isn't as toxic as people would leave you to believe, due to exposure requiring inhalation of dust or ingestion of contaminated food or water, as well as uranium decaying slowly through alpha radiation, which is blocked by your skin. Though you still shouldn't handle it. Trust me. But if you had a dagger or arrow containing uranium, you could leave a cruel stain on your target's bloodline, since uranium is a reproductive toxin. A uranium blade doesn't need to kill its target in order to end royal houses and create power vacuums faster than a Christmas wreath-shaped family. Thanks, Charles! Oh, before I continue on, I need to make a PSA relating to this topic. If you, for any reason, come across these kinds of clock hands, whether they are in a box or inside a watch, and especially if they glow in the dark under any circumstances, do not touch them. Make sure no one can touch them and inform your local authorities if you can. These contain the radioactive element radium, which is considered to be the most toxic of the completely radioactive elements, is extremely radioactive by itself, and decays into radon. It will kill you. The reason I want to mention this is that radium can be found in uranium, or albeit in very small amounts, but there are also people online selling radium-containing items. On an eBay alone, there are 14,452 results for radium. Please, for the love of your jaw, do not buy these items. In fact, don't even approach them. If you want to know what radium is capable of, look up the story of the Radium Girls. But be warned, that story isn't exactly bedtime story material. After that downer, we should finish this video with something a bit more lighthearted. And I think I've got something that'll work just fine. Memory metal. Long story short, memory metal is an alloy that can be deformed when cold, but returns to its original shape when heated. You could make a lot of things with this, but one idea I had is as a plot device. A map to a lost civilization which has been deformed during the ages, and the heroes have to figure out its mystery before the greedy baron can plunder the lost city and destroy its valuable heretics. Or awaken an ancient weapon, that's up to you to decide. This also fits in quite nicely with one of our previous examples, as one of the most prevalent memory metals is a copper aluminium nickel alloy. In fact, you could make it yourself with the proper equipment. First, you would need about 14% aluminum comparing to the end product's weight, 3% nickel by the same standard, and the rest would be copper. Melt the metals inside a vacuum chamber with a plasma arc in order to prevent impurities, and then cast the metal to an ingot. Then press the ingot with rolling presses or hot roll it into longer sections, and then draw it into a wire if needed. In order to train the object to return to the desired shape, heat the sections you want to bend between 400 and 500 Celsius degrees or 752 and 932 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes, shaped while still hot, and then cool the whole thing rapidly while quenching it in water, for example. All equipment needed can be either bought online or made with YouTube tutorials, though I always recommend wearing proper safety equipment, and having some assistance if things go wrong, especially if you are dealing with high voltages like with the arc furnace. And if you aren't sure how to do something safely, it's better to not do it at all. Or just commission something you want. That's why many of these companies that make these kinds of metals exist. And that about does it. Hopefully you've enjoyed the first part of this mini-series, because I'm going to make at least a few more videos about medieval magic, spellcasting and magic items being something to look forward to. Making these might take some time since my next semester is starting soon, and I have my bachelor's thesis to write. If you want to keep updated on future uploads, then like, comment and subscribe, as well as click the bell icon, because otherwise YouTube won't recommend the videos to you even though you're subscribed, which is completely fine and totally not incompetent whatsoever. Okay, bye now.